Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw review. And tonight's Raw was from the Cajun Dome in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I gotta say, tonight's Raw, I thought it was a solid show, in my opinion. Wasn't a great show. Wasn't a great or perfect show. Wasn't terrible, but it was a solid show. And it was announced today, before Raw went on the air. I read an article today, and this is coming from ringsidenews.com, but WrestleVotes ended up reporting it because the article stated that WWE writers were told to think outside the box for tonight's Raw, saying that the source said there is a push this week from WWE headquarters to make Raw feel different tonight. And for the past few weeks, the Raw scripts have been late, according to reports. And it was said in this report, it said it looked like the script for Raw was going to be late again. And I guess this is what WrestleVotes post is saying, that they were told there was a push this week in Stamford to make Raw feel different tonight, with those in power urging everyone to think outside the box. That said, tonight's show is not finalized as of now. And that article was released earlier today. And so tonight they had a few NXT superstars that came up. We had Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, DIY. We had Ricochet and Aleister Black. So it was cool seeing them. But I got to rant on this. I got to rant on the crowd tonight, because this crowd tonight for Raw was one of the most shittiest crowds I've seen. I know some crowds are dead for some Raw shows, but how did we go from the Houston crowd last night, which made Elimination Chamber, decent? How do we go from that crowd to Lafayette tonight, and the crowd is just silent? The crowd was silent throughout this whole show. I saw people in the crowd, they were sitting like this, not cheering for anything. There was I saw one person going this crowd did not give a shit about this show tonight. They were dead. There was no reaction to anything whatsoever. Yes, Ricochet might have gotten a few pops here and there, but the crowd was silent. They were like zombies. They were sleepwalking through the entire show. I mean, how do these people that attended this show tonight, they bought a ticket with their hard-earned money, they attend Raw, they sit there for 3 hours, maybe even more, considering they do superstars or main event before Raw goes live on the air. How do you sit there for all those hours and not react? This, right after tonight, I hope WWE does not go back to Lafayette. I hope they don't. And this proves why. Crowd did not react to anything. So yes, that's my rant on the crowd tonight. Fucking terrible, shitty crowd. Didn't react to anything. So yes, so let's get on with the review. Raw opened up tonight with Triple H in the ring, saying, You know, it's the time of the year. It's the time of the year. Excitement. And he goes on to say that we are on the road to WrestleMania. He says the last 24 hours should be proof enough that it's exciting. He says Sasha Banks and Bayley made history, becoming the first ever women's tag team champions. Says Finn Balor beat Bobby Lashley and Lio Rush in a 2-on-1 handicap match to become the Intercontinental Champion. He goes on to say Kofi Kingston captured the heart and imagination of the world to coming close to becoming the WWE Champion. Which, you know, you had to give it to Kofi last night. The crowd was really behind Kofi last night when it was just down to him and Daniel Bryan in the chamber. And he says Becky Lynch came around and showed the whole world that she won't let a 60-day suspension or a bum knee keep her from getting to Charlotte and Ronda. He goes on to say he has to say if she does that again, she will be arrested and prosecuted. And he says personally, Triple H said, you know, that was damn cool. And he goes on to say, speaking of pretty cool, DX is going into the WWE Hall of Fame. Yes, it was announced earlier today, early in the morning. ESPN ended up breaking the news because this was a rumor, or WWE spoiled it, that DX is going into the Hall of Fame. And it was confirmed by WWE earlier in the afternoon. And so DX are the first inductees going into the 2019 WWE Hall of Fame. And yes, the DX induction also included China, which I'm glad that China is getting put into the Hall of Fame with DX. Hopefully sometime WWE just puts China into the Hall of Fame by herself, which I think that will be really cool. And I could tell that it was probably, you know, Triple H wanted to put China into the Hall of Fame, you know, with DX. So, and then we had Triple H go on to say that you know, it's going to be himself, Shawn Michaels, Billy Gunn, Road Dogg, X-Pac, and China going into the Hall of Fame. He says he's going to pour gas on the fire. His responsibilities, you know, don't stop with Raw and SmackDown. He says, you know, he also stumbles over his words and oversees WWE's third touring brand, which of course is NXT. And so Triple H announces that, you know, some of the NXT superstars will make their Raw debut tonight. And those guys are Ricochet, Aleister Black, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, aka DIY. He goes on to say in NXT, he says, the future is now. And you'll see the future tonight. And then he says a tables match is going to take place now. And the tables match is going to be Braun Strowman versus Baron Corbin. Once again, tables match. But I have to say, it was a decent opening to Raw with Triple H, a decent opening segment with Triple H, and of course the crowd sitting there, you know, no reaction whatsoever when Triple H ended up announcing those guys, Ricochet, Aleister Black, Gargano, and Ciampa. Crowd didn't react to none of that. So we had Braun Strowman versus Baron Corbin, tables match. Like the no disqualification match wasn't enough last night at the Chamber. This match itself, like 10 minutes of the match took place outside. They didn't get into the ring until Raw came back from the commercial. But it was just Corbin going after Strowman on the outside. Strowman ended up coming back, and the end of the match, Braun Strowman ended up putting Corbin through the table. And that was it. All in all, match itself, meh, didn't care for it. And then Paul Heyman ended up coming out after the match. Strowman ended up grabbing Heyman's collar, ended up choking Heyman, and Heyman was like, "Oh, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And so Strowman ended up laying off of Heyman. And then Raw went to commercial. Before Raw went to commercial, Heyman was like, "Ladies and gentlemen," he was trying to get it out, but he couldn't because of Strowman, ended up choking him from the collar. He's like, "Oh, I need water." And so Raw went to commercial. Then when Raw came back from commercial, Paul Heyman was in the ring, and he says he can't he can't say he's surprised by Strowman's actions, and everyone should be jealous and envious of Brock Lesnar. And he goes on to say that Lesnar is the dominant champion of WWE and MMA. And he's put something together to educate us about Lesnar himself. And so he had a video package just all explain about Brock Lesnar. And so after the video package, Heyman says Lesnar conquered the Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania 30. And he says to the crowd, how many of us think Seth Rollins will emerge from WrestleMania the Universal Champion? Heyman says there is not enough fire in Seth Rollins' soul to burn down Suplex City. And then Finn Balor's music ends up hitting. And so that was a segment with Paul Heyman. It was meh segment. And so then we had Finn Balor. He ended up coming out, ended up getting on the mic, and he ends up saying, it's been a while since he's held a championship, which I fully agree on. I fully agree with him on. And he says it feels good. Well, it feels good if you're a Balor fan, like me, because Balor should have gotten, should have wore a championship around him, after after relinquishing the Universal Championship. And Balor says, growing up, growing up watching the greats from Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, he says it's a dream to hold the Intercontinental Championship and continue its legacy. And so Lio Rush ends up coming out. He ends up saying to Balor that Balor doesn't deserve to be Intercontinental Champion, and that Bobby Lashley deserves to be it. And so we see Bobby Lashley come from behind, ends up attacking Finn Balor, stomping away at him. And then we see both Lio Rush and Lashley end up attacking Balor. Lashley ends up slamming Balor, and Lio then hits a splash from the top onto Balor. And Ricochet ends up coming out, comes out to crickets from the crowd, from this shitty crowd. And he ends up coming out, ends up taking out Leo and Lashley, which led to a tag team match. And so when Raw came back from the commercial, we had a tag team match, Balor and Ricochet versus Lio Rush and Bobby Lashley. And the match itself, it was decent. Finn Balor and Ricochet, they made a good tag team here. Ricochet, really I'm a fan of his. He was Prince Puma in Lucha Underground. And I couldn't believe, like I said, I keep talking about the shitty crowd tonight. I can't believe the crowd hasn't popped, didn't pop for like Ricochet or any of the NXT stars. This also proves that this crowd tonight, they don't watch NXT. But the match itself, like I said, it was decent. Finn Balor and Ricochet ended up getting the win. Ricochet ended up hitting his finisher, which is a 630 senton on Lio Rush. Scored a win for him and Balor. But all in all, the match itself, it was decent. Then we saw Drew McIntyre. He was talking to Triple H. And McIntyre says to Triple H, when he first got here, he was going to take whatever to prove to Triple H. To prove, himself. To prove himself. And he ends up telling Triple H to give him Seth Rollins. And that he'll prove it to him. And so here comes Dean Ambrose. And he says to McIntyre, well, he ain't doing anything tonight. What about him? And so Ambrose ends up slapping McIntyre. It looked almost like a real slap. And Triple H ends up saying to McIntyre, do you want me to give you Seth or Ambrose? And so McIntyre ends up saying to change the match. So then later on tonight we got a match, Dean Ambrose versus Drew McIntyre. Then we had the Lucha House Party, Kalisto, Gran Metalik, Lince Dorado versus Zack Ryder and Curt Hawkins. I did not give a shit about this match. Lucha House Party ended up winning the match. Hurricanrana from Lince Dorado on Curt Hawkins. So, did not give a shit about this match. Then we had Dasha Fuentes. She was introducing Heavy Machinery, Ostosovic, and Tucker Knight. She was interviewing them, saying that that Heavy Machinery are a very impressive team, and what will the crowd think of them? And so Tucker Knight says they're blue collar solid, and they get the job done. Working hard and getting a nice sweat in the gym before following up with red meat. And then it was like steaks and weight. And then you had Otis, back outside the ring. But it was just that, you had Otis, doing whatever. I don't know. Otis Dosovic sounds to me, he sounds like Chris Farley. To me, he has Chris Farley's voice. And when I heard, when I hear Otis talk, I'm like, I think of Chris Farley because he has, Chris Farley's voice. But he sounds just like him. Then we had, Lacey Evans comes out, walks down to the ring, not walks down to the ring, but walks down the ramp. And she ends up walking back up. So it's like what happened, what she did last night at the Chamber, where she just came out randomly. But I hear that WWE is going to give Lacey Evans a big push. And then Heavy Machinery ended up strutting themselves down the ramp. And, they ended up going back up, the ramp. They were trying to impress Lacey Evans. So, and that was that. Then we saw Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa backstage, DIY. Good seeing them. And Bobby Roode and Chad Gable, they end up coming. They end up welcoming Gargano and Ciampa to Raw. And they ask, why do you have a match against the Revival? Gable ends up telling them, this isn't NXT. It's Raw. And on Raw, they start from the bottom and work their way up. And then he ends up saying, why are you getting this match when it should be them? And Gargano says, the way he sees it, they've been running the hottest brand for years, and they're here to take over. And so then we got the Revival coming. They end up greeting Gargano and Ciampa. They say to them that it's been a while, and they're not here looking for respect. They're looking to make an impression at their expense. And the Revival say, they don't need luck, and they'll see them out there. And, sorry about that, but I said, the Revival, greet DIY, but it was the DIY that said, it's been a while, and they're not, here looking for respect. I got my notes got my notes mixed up here, but really glad to see Gargano and Ciampa on Raw. And then we had the match, Gargano and Ciampa DIY versus the Revival tag team match, and this is pretty much a rematch from NXT TakeOver Toronto, which that was a really great match between these guys. Sorry about that, but I was saying DIY versus the Revival. It was a tag team match, and this is a rematch. This is like a rematch from NXT TakeOver Toronto, which the match that they had there was really awesome. It was a really great match, and Gargano and Ciampa ended up defeating the Revival at TakeOver Toronto. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match, and they defeated the Revival, and they became the NXT Tag Team Champions. And, Gargano and Ciampa came out tonight. Of course, crickets from the crowd. As usual tonight with this shitty crowd. But, so DIY versus the Revival tag team match tonight. I really liked it. It was a really enjoyable match. It was a good match, but the crowd, ugh. I keep on saying the crowd tonight. That's how bad this crowd was tonight. But it was good seeing Gargano and Ciampa again. They with this reunion. I know Gargano and Ciampa, their rivalry that they had, which was awesome. But Gargano and Ciampa end up winning the match. They end up hitting a super kick, knee strike combo to Scott Dawson. Pinned Scott Dawson, and Gargano and Ciampa end up winning the match. So it was NXT. It was NXT TakeOver Toronto all over again with these guys. Well, all in all, it was a good match. Really enjoyed it. Then we had Dasha Fuentes. She was interviewing Balor and Ricochet backstage about Finn Balor's 24 hours that he had. Balor says last night was all about him, and he says tonight it's all about Ricochet. Balor ends up welcoming Ricochet to Raw, and he ends up leaving. Ricochet ends up saying, you know, you can envision how you reach your goals, but it's never exactly like you plan. And he ends up saying, but once you live your dreams, it feels better than anything you can ever imagine. He says, you know, he's from Paducah, Kentucky, I think that's how you pronounce it, and he's on Raw. He goes on to say, we haven't seen the last of him. And he's going to show the entire WWE universe why there's one and only Ricochet. Good, decent interview from Ricochet. Then we had Kevin Owens. He was updating us. He says, you know, he's rehabbing and training and enjoying much time with his family. And he says he is picturing what his return is going to be like. He goes on to say that he's ready to fight again, and showed that he was at like the movies with his son. So I'm really liking these Kevin Owens updates from him. Really hope, you know, to see him back soon, because I know when he returns, he's going to get a huge pop from the crowd. I could picture it. So then after that we had the women's tag team champions, Sasha Banks and Bayley, come out, and Bayley thanks the crowd, and she says, you know, that she was really feeling it. And she goes on to say that last night was an emotional night for the both of them. And she says they are the first ever WWE Women's Tag Team Champions. And Sasha says this feels like a dream, but it's not a dream. And that they did this, and that, you know, we all did this. She ends up saying how far that they both have come from NXT, and they made it up to the main roster, and you know how that they have done it together. Bayley ends up saying they've gone from hating each other, which we all don't want to think of that whole storyline, that whole feud that went nowhere. And she ends up saying they've gone from hating each other to loving each other. And they've felt every single emotion together. Sasha says it's because they have the same goal, that they both have the same goal, and she can't imagine doing it with anyone else. Bayley says it took them going to war to realize that they have to be together to change the world. And they plan on being the women's tag team champions for a very long time. And Sasha says they have their heart and soul set on helping build the division. And she says they'll defend against anyone, past, present, and future, whether it's, you know, Raw or SmackDown or NXT. And Bayley says they recognize and respect how special the titles are, not just to them, but to the entire women's evolution. And so Nia Jax and Tamina end up coming out. Nia Jax, you know, tells them, you know, to stop, and that nobody wants to sit through their nauseating love fest. And Nia says she'll still give it to both of them for winning the women's tag team titles. She ends up saying they're cute with their matching outfits, but she doesn't get it. And Nia says she doesn't want to ruin their celebration because it's the best they'll ever get. And she says everybody knows that Sasha only cares about herself. And history proves that anytime she wins a title, she loses it in her first defense. And so Nia Jax and Tamina, they come to the ring, but Sasha and Bayley end up taking them down. They end up running Nia Jax and Tamina off. And that's how it ended, the segment. But it was a really enjoyable segment with Sasha and Bayley. Really happy that that they're the women's tag team champions. They both deserve it after both of them had a horrible 2018 with that whole storyline feud that they had, which went nowhere, where they ended up seeing Dr. Shelby. But yeah, but it was an enjoyable segment with the both of them. Then we had the video package of DX's Hall of Fame induction, which was awesome. Really like to know who WWE announces next for 2019 Hall of Fame. Their next inductees for this year. Then we had Drew McIntyre versus Dean Ambrose. This was a short match. Drew McIntyre just dominated on Dean Ambrose. Drew McIntyre ended up hitting a Claymore kick to Ambrose. And then, he didn't go for the pin. The match could have been over there, but Drew McIntyre ended up hitting a second Claymore kick to Dean Ambrose. McIntyre ended up pinning Ambrose, win the match. So Drew McIntyre ends up winning. Pretty much that was basically it. It was a short match. Then we had Dasha Fuentes. She ended up interviewing Seth Rollins about if he has any regrets challenging Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. And Seth says you can't call Paul a liar, because I forgot to mention, before this interview took place, we had a continuing of Paul Heyman's video package about Brock Lesnar. And so Seth Rollins says, you can't call Paul Heyman a liar, and everything that he said about Brock Lesnar is the truth. And he says, but where he's wrong is, Seth, isn't headed into WrestleMania with a death wish, and that he's headed to end Brock Lesnar's reign of terror. He goes on to say whether he walks out under his own power or gets stretched out, he promises he's leaving WrestleMania as the Universal Champion. And so Dean Ambrose is shown, he's shown popping his neck, and Seth Rollins asks him if he can help him with anything. And so Ambrose was like, where were you just now? Thinking that Seth was going to go out and help him. And Seth ends up asking Ambrose if he's completely lost his mind. And then Ambrose is shown he was just, giving Rollins a look, and he ends up shrugging. Gotta say, it was funny though. It was funny about, with that. But it was a short, it was a good interview with Seth Rollins. Sorry about that, but I was saying it was a good interview with Seth Rollins. Then we had Elias. He was out there. He was saying that he's fed up on how he's treated. He ends up calling Lafayette a swamp. And he goes on to say that he's constantly getting disrespected and interrupted. Goes on to say he's going to sing a song for himself. And hopefully he'll forget that anyone in the crowd exists. And so as he's trying to play, he gets interrupted by Aleister Black. So Aleister Black makes his entrance. He had his special entrance where he had the candles, and then he rises up, which is awesome. The special entrance that they give him all the time for takeovers. Really, really awesome entrance that Aleister Black has. And so then we had the match. Aleister Black versus Elias. Decent match. Really enjoyable match. Aleister Black was entertaining, even though the crowd, like I said, the crowd was crickets. They didn't even know who Aleister Black is, because you tell this crowd possibly doesn't watch NXT. But Aleister Black ended up winning the match. He ended up hitting the Black Mass to Elias, which is his finisher. And so Aleister Black ends up winning the match. So yeah, well, all in all, it was a decent match. You know, it was good seeing Aleister Black here. Then we had the main event. Ronda Rousey rematch from last night. Ronda Rousey versus Ruby Riott for the Raw Women's Championship. And this match was longer than last night. Than last night at the Chamber pay-per-view. Ronda, I have to say, decent here. Ruby Riott gave it all she got here in the match tonight. And yeah, Ronda Rousey ended up winning the match. Ended up locking in the armbar to Ruby Riott. Ruby Riott ended up tapping out. There was a point in the match where Ronda ended up hitting the the judo throw, but the Riott Squad, Sarah Logan and Liv Morgan ended up pulling Ruby Riott out of the ring, and that led to Ronda going up to the top, taking out Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan on the outside, and that's when Ronda ended up locking in the armbar to Ruby Riott. So Ronda Rousey wins the match, still retains the Raw Women's Championship. After the match, Liv Morgan comes in. Ronda ends up delivering the Piper's Pit to Liv Morgan. Then she ends up judo throwing Sarah Logan. And that's how Raw ended tonight. So, but Ronda Rousey versus Ruby Riott, it was decent. It was much longer than the match that they had last night. So, yes. Anyways, that was Raw tonight. Overall, decent, solid show. Not great or perfect. Wasn't terrible. So, but all in all, the crowd, like I kept saying, terrible fucking crowd. One of the worst crowds tonight. So, yes, anyways, that's it for my review of tonight's Monday Night Raw. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this video. And definitely give this video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. And I will see you all tomorrow night for the SmackDown review. Bye.